Usually startups come to us when they have new features, they're growing very fast, and the team is so focused on the existing product and they need to be sure that the thing is done properly and fast. And so that's where we come in.
Welcome to the Week in Italian Startup, where we discuss the latest highlights happening in the Italian tech and investment ecosystem.
All right, Giulio, welcome. Welcome to the show. Yeah. Welcome, Nick, also.
Thank you, Jack. Welcome, Giulio.
Thanks
Pleasure
for the invite.
having you.
Pleasure. Yeah. So Giulio is founder of BELKA, and he will talk about BELKA a little more, just to understand where exactly is located into the startup space. So we've been talking about founders, investors, operators, and you have a very particular spot in there.
Yes.
And I think it's very interesting. So let's dive into that.
Let's say that basically, if startups are the Cinderella of the situation of the story, we are the fairy owned that help them thrive. I'm a huge startup nerd, and by the way, I'm super happy to meet you in real person. You're like, I usually talk about them, my imaginary friends over the internet. You see avatars, but you never meet them. So, as I said,
we are real. You can touch us.
Flesh and blood. Flesh and blood.
That's incredible. And
it's incredible.
Who would have said?
I know, right?
I've not been catfished by a startup newsletter, and so. As I told you, I'm a huge startup nerd, and following the newsletter has been super interesting to also see all the scenario growing. Where we are is in the interface design and in the front-end development space, meaning that usually startups come to us when they have new features, they're growing very fast, and the team is so focused on the existing product and they need to be sure that the thing is done properly and fast. And so that's where we come in. A couple of things that we did in the latest months has been, for example, the app for spiagge.it, which is kind of Airbnb for the beach. So you basically go and you actually find a spot there.
They code a spot and then you book a spot on the beach.
Yeah, you can see the place in the sun.
Wow.
Where you are compared to the sea. And they also hire people from Booking, so I think they're going to expand to a lot of things that are ancillary to the main core of just the...
What kind of work did you do for this company?
We both did the design and development of the app.
Nice.
So we work on the side with the core team, the technology and the product team usually. And what we do, we supercharge them with some of the things that they don't do or they don't have time to. And working on the very last mile, which is interfaces, you can actually adjust to the pace and integrate pretty fast. So what we don't do is all the backend part, all the database and behind the scenes. That's too complicated. Entering that part is crazy, and no one is asking for that part. But for the interfaces, having a well done and a well done and polished interface, that's key. Because in the end, you're in the hands of the user, so that's what we do.
And that's an important part of the development stack, because I mean, the wrong button in the wrong place can be percentages of non-converting users.
Yeah, that's correct. Another thing that we do, for example, are user testing. So basically, before developing the thing, you design it and you test it with real users. We did this recently for 1000 farmacie. I don't know if that should be translated.
It can be 1000 farmacie.
I can't disclose much of the work, which is still in development for a new feature, but we discovered a lot of things.
Nice.
We did the same for Facturing Cloud back in the days for the fatturazione elettronica, for the electronic invoicing, which is becoming a standard in the European Union. And you can test stuff before developing and quickly iterate on the interfaces. And that means like a lot of differences. For Facturing Cloud, for example, it's been pretty interesting because we started with the idea of having it very quick because it was an app as well. So we thought, people are in movement, so they want to have a fast pace and do stuff on the move. It's wrong. It's complete bullshit.
Wow.
People are scared because it's fiscal information. You don't want to have fiscal information wrong, so we split that into different steps, and we ended up delivering a completely different product from what our customer, which is Facturing Cloud, initially asked us, because their customer told them so. They were completely scared by the first product. Yeah.
So I have a question. Like, when is the sweet moment when, for example, in Fattura and Cloud, they found themselves like ready to work with someone like you and do the jump? So help, sort of asking the help of the fairy in the Cinderella story.
Right.
So what's that moment?
It's scale.
Scale.
Yeah, because when you're testing the market, we can help maybe run some experiments, but in the end, you still have the business to be figured out.
Yeah.
So you're moving blindly, let's say. While on the other end, when you need to scale, that's where things becomes interesting also on the approach and how you do the work. A simple example, a design system is the set of components that are the visual language of an interface. You don't do that at the beginning. It's just a waste of time. The interface doesn't count. You just want to see if people will buy things. If what you do is useful. On the other one, when you scale, if you don't have that, you will spread a lot of different parts through all the interface, which is a bummer from the visual standpoint, because it's like speaking different languages in different scenarios, but that's still, let's say, a problem, but not a major problem. Like, you can have a good business with an design. The problem is a product problem, because you scatter also different kind of code through all the product. You start to have technical debt, you start to have different screens that do the same thing but with different components, and that's where it's useful to have someone who already saw that with also other scale-ups.
Right.
I can guide you a little bit on that. We usually do engagement that are not super long, like from 6 to 12 months at best.
Yeah.
But because then after the scale part, you usually internalize resources, which is totally fine.
It's a part of the process, probably.
But for Spiaggia, for example, not having a design system today would mean that the new features of the app would be basically invented from the ground up. And so that's where we come in usually.
Interesting.
Is there any difference in you had in time also traditional corporate customers, right? Is there any difference between having a corporate customer asking for a new app or whatever, and a startup betting on you, the front end of the new app, and then you?
Well,
sorry, I'm kind of anticipated the answer, but
right. So, a couple of things. First one, again, I really like all the fast-moving companies and the startups, so I'm heavily biased towards those kind of companies. Firstly, because it really matters to them. It's not like a gimmick, a part of the experience that they want to see, but they're not super convinced about. They need that. And it's much rewarding to work in that kind of situation. Also risky, and you need to know what you're doing, but it's way more rewarding. On the other hand, usually the bigger the company, the harder is getting all the stakeholder involved, the communication clear, having everyone aligned, and also because we work also with bigger companies, we just not the major part of our work, but that's a different kind of job. Like just having a clear idea of where you're going and everyone feeling okay, telling their opinion, because sometimes there is politics, so I can't say this in front of that person, but you feel that something enough, so you go and talk with it. So that's part of the work that you have to do, because in the end, you need to develop something and produce something that they want, but that's just harder. Aside from that, also speaking about the technical part of the work, usually startup you have to invent stuff, so you can gather information from similar products. Let's say you have a funnel for delivering stuff, you go and look for Deliveroo, maybe if you don't send stuff like Deliveroo. On the other end, for enterprise corporate, usually you have a lot of feedback from the customers because they're well established, and it's mostly work of rework stuff that's been there for a while, and they are just getting confused about where should we put our new features, or how we can stop people complaining about the fact that our software is not very understandable. So that's usually the case for those kind of companies. It can happen with startups as well. Like you go in a blitz at the beginning for the business, you try to figure it out. As I said before, you still don't have your everything figured out. And then you start to rationalize and channel that into a product that makes sense. visually.
What are the most common kind of mistake that scaling or about to scale startup are making that you always recognize? Like, oh, I've seen this, I can help you. I've seen that, I can help you.
Yeah.
Is there any pattern that repeats? And you guys, I'm sure you're excellent at finding those and solving quickly those problematic aspects. So I was wondering, is there anything like pop into your eyes? Like
there's both on the technical and on the design part.
Yeah.
So technical is just experience. Like take an app, for example. Being in those tech field for a while means that, for example, React Native, which is the framework that we develop apps on, they changed the pattern for navigation 3 times now in the last 6 years, which is normal. Front-end development is just crazy.
Just keeps going and
it's just
endless.
Yeah, you just change framework forever and then you die. And but the point is,
perspective. Yeah, it's a great life. It's a great life.
Point is, like, if you don't know which framework to choose, that's not fun.
Right.
Like for a while, the Wix developed navigation framework was the good one. Then they changed to React Navigation. There is a lot going on, and so having at least an idea of what is going on there, that's useful. So just starting and doing fancy stuff. The other one is using just technology that is too new. We had for a customer the APIs in GraphQL instead of just simple REST APIs. It sounds super cool, but in the end, if it's not part of the innovation you're bringing to the table, it's just not useful.
It's not useless. It
it
doesn't add anything.
It's just using because it's shiny.
It is the latest buzzword, GraphQL. I want GraphQL.
Yeah, and in the end, that caused a little bit of trouble with that project, a specific project. GraphQL has some security issues if you don't know how to patch them. And the other one, I believe, staying more on the visual/prototype side, is not testing soon enough the projects. So you go bold because you say, all right, I know how to do these kind of things, and then you design stuff and you never test it on the design phase, and then you develop it and you start having the first betas, and at that point you have the idea of the product is well or not, and it's very late because developing stuff is 10 times more expensive than changing stuff like on Figma.
Yeah.
Those are the things that I think I saw the most. So yeah, we try to de-risk as much as we can all the development cycle, because a bad product is not something that we are going to appear in a good light as well. So that's super important, and it's one of the hardest angles for us, because you can't fully control the development or the design cycle, and sometimes you see stuff that you're not very sure that it's going to be well, but it's just not your company. So
Sure.
obviously you see it, but in the end.
Interesting. Awesome.
So Giulio, you're an entrepreneur as well, and you're based out of not an unusual geography, but not a core geography. So tell us more about working from
From Trento.
From Trento.
Great Trento, international metropolis. Go ahead.
Yeah, it's second just to New York, for the amount of skyscrapers.
Because then, I mean, in the digital technology, the problem is you need to get to talent, you need to motivate talent, you get to keep talent, and
Yeah, so at the beginning, I started very early in my career. I'm still not I'm probably not the oldest in the event today, but point is, at the beginning, we were starting out. We also tested our own products. That's how we ended up helping others. And I believe that there is a good amount of talent, especially junior. But then we were one of the first companies figuring out that you can do stuff remotely. Like in 2016, when we started, that was kind of new, while now it's super established. And we never worked that much with Trento. Trento, for anyone who's looking at the podcast, is northern part of Italy, 100k inhabitants, so it's very small. Good for skiing. We have also good university.
Excellent location.
It's a great place to live.
Yeah, great for living.
Yeah.
For sure.
On the other end, like all the customers that we had, or least like 99% were outside Trento.
Of course.
Honestly, like the workshop at the beginning of the project, the kickoff, that part, we still do that in person, and we try to see people in face at least at the beginning to build trust and know each other. But what we saw, even back in the days when people were not that much used to this kind of work, is that you actually can do remote work. So I don't think it ever hurt our business. On the other hand, it kind of made it to the way of working with some certain kind of companies, which are those who I'm speaking about today. Some example from before, Spiagge is in Rimini, Switch is in Milan, Factoring Cloud is in Bergamo. So you end up working with companies that recognize that this kind of working can be done.
They get it. I mean, they've been working with it. They get that development can be remotely anywhere, and it works. It's not like an old school corporation that they don't get this. So that's a big advantage actually for you. And it can backfire actually. Remote can always backfire, because like you can really intensify the amount of work in different scenarios instead of being physically present. Yeah, that's another story probably.
I think also clarifying tense situation is a little bit harder on remote.
Good point.
Yeah, because you need to you need to have a lot of trust. Right. And we try to solve that via a lot of transparency. Sure. So you can see what is going on, all the code is shared up front, you have all the issue trackers and so on. You can do it, but you have to work differently from just being everyone in the same room. But you deliberately find moments to connect with your client, with the company. So that I think that's very powerful, because then it's really blends really well with the team. At the end of the project, you're basically one gigantic team, like working and like also making funny memes and jokes about each other. So it's very fun. So there is a good Slack plays a lot of importance in this, like producing custom emojis through. Wow, it's specific. It's very specific. That's very specific. Awesome. Yeah. All right, Giulio, thank you so much. Yeah, pleasure to Yeah, keep up with the newsletter. Absolutely. I will. We will do it absolutely. And thank you for joining. It was super interesting.